The mortgage payment bounced again, George. Can you cover it this month? My name is George. I'm 22 years old, and I've been paying the mortgage on our family's lake house in Burlington, Vermont for the past 3 years, while juggling 2 jobs and a full course load at the University of Vermont. Can you believe that? My dad, Vincent, called me every month with the same request, always casual, like I was some kind of financial safety net he could pull whenever things got tight. Welcome to Jake's Revenge, where we dive into stories of betrayal and redemption that hit you right in the gut. I worked nights at a local auto parts store and weekends doing landscaping for wealthy families around Lake Champlain. Every dollar I earned seemed to disappear into that house, a place I barely got to enjoy anymore. While my younger sister, Brianna, spent her summers lounging on the dock with her friends, I was either working or studying for my mechanical engineering degree. Sure, Dad. I'll transfer the money tonight, I said, same as always. But something felt different this time. There was excitement in his voice, a smugness I hadn't heard before. He mentioned something about big changes coming and how Brianna was finally going to step up and contribute. I didn't think much of it then. Brianna contributing anything seemed about as likely as snow in July. Wait till you hear what happened next, because this is where the story takes a shocking turn, only on Jake's Revenge. The lake house had been in our family for 15 years. Dad bought it when his construction business was booming, back when I was 7 and Brianna was 5. Those early summers were perfect. Fishing with Dad at dawn, swimming until our fingers pruned, roasting marshmallows while Mom told stories around the fire pit. But Mom passed away when I was 16, and everything changed. Dad threw himself into work. Brianna developed a taste for expensive things, and I somehow became the one holding everything together. I'd been covering the mortgage since I turned 19. Dad said it was temporary, just until the business picked up again. But 3 years later, I was still making that monthly transfer, still sacrificing my own future for a house that felt more like a burden than a blessing. That night, as I sat in my cramped apartment near campus, I stared at my bank statement. After paying the mortgage, utilities, and my own rent, I had barely enough left for groceries. My textbook money had gone to property taxes. My car needed new brakes, but that would have to wait again. Brianna's social media was filled with pictures from her latest shopping spree in Boston. Designer purses, expensive dinners, weekend trips to New York City. She was 20 years old and had never worked a day in her life. Meanwhile, I was wearing the same 3 shirts in rotation and eating ramen noodles for the 4th night in a row. Something was definitely changing. I could feel it in my bones. The way you sense a storm coming before the first clouds appear. Growing up, I'd always been the responsible one. When Mom got sick during my junior year of high school, I stepped up without being asked. I drove her to chemotherapy appointments, helped with household chores, and kept my grades up so she wouldn't worry about my future. After she died, Dad seemed lost, and I naturally became the bridge between him and Brianna. Brianna had always been Dad's favorite, though he'd never admit it. She inherited Mom's bright smile and easy charm, while I got Dad's stubborn streak and tendency to overthink everything. When Brianna cried, people listened. When I had problems, I was expected to solve them myself. The warning signs had been there for months. Dad started taking mysterious phone calls, always stepping outside or into another room. He'd mention meeting with lawyers and financial advisors, but whenever I asked about the business or our finances, he'd change the subject. Don't worry about grown-up problems, son. Focus on your studies. At 22, I was hardly a child, but Dad still treated me like one when it was convenient, except when he needed money. Then suddenly, I was mature enough to handle adult responsibilities. My friends at college couldn't understand why I was working so hard just to support my family. Dude, you're missing out on everything, my roommate Tyler would say. Live a little. You're only young once. But they didn't understand. My family was all I had left, and keeping us together felt like honoring Mom's memory. I'd started noticing small changes in how Dad talked about Brianna. There was a secretive pride in his voice, like he was planning something special for her. Meanwhile, our conversations became more transactional. He'd call about the mortgage, ask about school, then hang up. No more long talks about life or work. No more invitations to help with construction projects on weekends. The lake house itself was showing signs of neglect. The dock needed repairs. The roof leaked in 2 places. And the heating system was on its last legs. I'd mentioned these issues to Dad multiple times, but he always said we'd deal with them next year or when things settle down. Last month, I'd driven up to check on the property and found Brianna there with 6 of her college friends. They'd trashed the place. Empty bottles everywhere, cigarette burns on Mom's antique coffee table, and someone had broken the sliding door to the deck. When I called Dad about it, he just sighed and said, "Boys will be boys. She's young and having fun." But they weren't boys. They were spoiled adults who didn't respect anything that wasn't theirs. And apparently neither did my sister. The call came on a Tuesday night in October while I was studying for midterms. Dad's voice was different, brighter, more energetic than I'd heard in years. "George, I need to tell you something important. I've set up a trust fund for Brianna. $500,000. She can access it starting tomorrow." I stopped writing mid-sentence. $500,000. More money than I'd ever seen in my life. More than I'd earn in years of working 2 jobs and scraping by. That's... Wow, Dad. That's a lot of money. "She deserves it," he said firmly. "Your mother always wanted to make sure Brianna was taken care of, and I finally found a way to honor that. The lawyer said it's the best way to help her get started in life." I waited for him to mention me, to explain how this affected our arrangement with the lake house, to acknowledge that I'd been supporting the family for 3 years while Brianna partied, but he didn't. "So, she'll be able to help with the house expenses now?" I asked carefully. "Oh, she'll figure all that out. The trust is hers to manage however she sees fit. You know how smart she is with money." Smart with money? Brianna, who'd never balanced a checkbook or worked an hour in her life. Brianna, who thought money grew on trees and treated my monthly transfers like they were automatic deposits from heaven? After I hung up, I sat in my apartment for 2 hours, just thinking. Mom had wanted to take care of Brianna, but what about me? What about the sacrifices I'd made, the opportunities I'd missed, the relationships I'd lost because I was always working or stressed about money? I pulled up my bank records and calculated exactly how much I'd contributed to the family over the past 3 years. Mortgage payments, utilities, repairs, property taxes. It came to nearly $60,000. Money that could have paid for my entire education, bought me a reliable car, maybe even let me study abroad like I'd always dreamed. The next morning, I saw Brianna's Instagram stories. She was at a luxury car dealership in Burlington, posing next to a brand new BMW convertible. The caption read, "Trust fund baby mode activated. Thanks, Daddy." She'd blown $40,000 in one day on a car while I was driving a 15-year-old Honda with a rattling exhaust and tires that should have been replaced months ago. I closed the app and opened my banking website. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't going to make that automatic transfer to the Lakehouse account. If Brianna had $500,000 to play with, she could figure out how to pay a $3,000 mortgage. I felt lighter than I had in years, and also terrified. The first text came 2 weeks later, right as I was leaving my morning engineering class. "Mortgage is due today. The payment didn't go through. Can you handle it, Dad?" I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "I thought Brianna was handling house expenses now with her trust fund." My phone rang immediately. "George, what's this about? You've always covered the mortgage. Brianna's money is for her future, not family bills." "Dad, I've been covering it for 3 years while working 2 jobs. I need to focus on my own future now." There was a long pause. "Son, we can't afford to lose this house. It's all we have left of your mother." The guilt hit exactly where he intended. But I'd been thinking about this for weeks, running scenarios in my head, preparing for this conversation. Brianna just bought a $40,000 car. The mortgage is $3,000 a month. She could cover it for over a year with what she spent on that BMW. "That's different," Dad said, his voice hardening. "That car is an investment in her image." Her confidence. You don't understand the pressure she's under. Pressure? I almost laughed. The pressure of choosing between designer handbags and spa treatments? I can't do it anymore, Dad. I'm behind on my own rent. I'm eating one meal a day, and my car is falling apart. I need to take care of myself. Fine, he said, the word sharp as a blade. I'll figure something else out. But don't come crying to me when you realize how good you had it. He hung up, leaving me standing outside the engineering building with my hands shaking. I'd never directly defied him before, never put my own needs first. It felt foreign, and terrifying, and somehow necessary. Over the next week, I learned just how deep the trap was. Dad called my Uncle Patrick, who'd co-signed the original mortgage years ago. Uncle Patrick called me, confused and concerned. George, your dad says you've abandoned the family. He's asking me to take over the payments, but I'm 3 years from retirement myself. What's going on? I explained the situation, and Uncle Patrick was quiet for a long time. Jesus, kid. 500 grand for Brianna, and nothing for you after everything you've done? It's not about the money, I lied. It was absolutely about the money, but also about respect, recognition, basic fairness. Like hell, it isn't. Your dad's lost his mind if he thinks that girl can manage a trust fund responsibly. But Dad wasn't thinking rationally. He was running on guilt and favoritism, and a fantasy version of Brianna that existed only in his head. Meanwhile, my sister was posting pictures from a week-long vacation in Miami, apparently unaware that the family was facing a financial crisis. I started getting calls from Brianna's friends, people I barely knew, asking if I was really going to let the family lose the lake house over money. Somehow, I'd become the villain in this story, the selfish son who'd abandoned his responsibilities. The worst part was doubting myself. At night, lying in bed, I'd wonder if I was being petty and vindictive. Maybe I should just make the payment one more time, give them a chance to figure things out. But then I'd remember Brianna's Instagram stories, her casual cruelty about money, and my resolve would harden again. 2 weeks after my conversation with Dad, I got a call from the bank. They were starting foreclosure proceedings. Dad had listed me as a reference on the mortgage documents, and they wanted to know if I was planning to bring the account current. No, I said quietly. I'm not. The voice on the other end was professional but surprised. Sir, are you aware this will significantly impact your credit score as a reference? I wasn't aware, actually. Dad had never mentioned that my name was tied to the mortgage in any way. Just one more thing he'd failed to tell me. The foreclosure notice arrived on a Thursday morning in November. Dad called me that afternoon, and for the first time since this started, he sounded scared. George, we need to talk. Can you come to the house? I drove to his place in Essex, a modest ranch home that always smelled like sawdust and coffee. Dad looked older than I remembered, grayer around the edges with new lines around his eyes. Sit down, son. I need to explain some things. He pulled out a folder of documents and spread them across the kitchen table. Bank statements, legal papers, loan agreements, a paper trail of financial decisions I'd never been told about. The construction business has been struggling for 2 years, he began. I had to take out a second mortgage on this house to keep it afloat. Then the lake house started having problems with the foundation. The repairs are going to cost $60,000 minimum. I stared at the papers, trying to process what he was telling me. Why didn't you tell me any of this? I didn't want to worry you. You were doing so well in school, working so hard. I thought I could handle it. But there was more. The trust fund for Brianna hadn't come from his savings. It had come from liquidating Mom's life insurance policy and his own retirement accounts. He'd bet everything on the idea that giving Brianna a lump sum would somehow solve the family's financial problems. I thought she'd be responsible with it, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I thought she'd help with the family expenses. Maybe invest some of it wisely. Instead, Brianna had spent nearly half the money in 6 weeks. The BMW, the Miami vacation, designer clothes, expensive dinners, jewelry for her friends. She was treating the trust fund like a game, seeing how quickly she could burn through it. "Where's the rest of the money?" I asked. Dad pulled out Brianna's bank statements. I shouldn't have been surprised, but seeing the numbers on paper was still shocking. Shopping sprees in Boston and New York. A $15,000 weekend in Las Vegas. Concert tickets, spa treatments, a $5,000 handbag. She won't answer my calls, Dad admitted. When I try to talk to her about budgeting or saving, she says I'm trying to control her. She thinks the money is hers to do whatever she wants with. Legally, he was right. The trust was structured so that Brianna had complete control once she turned 20. Dad couldn't take it back or impose restrictions. He'd given a 20-year-old girl with no financial experience $500,000 and hoped for the best. The bank wants $75,000 to stop the foreclosure, he continued. That's 3 months of missed payments plus penalties. Even if Brianna helped now, she doesn't have enough left. I looked at my father, really looked at him, and saw a man who'd made a series of terrible decisions driven by guilt and favoritism. He'd favored Brianna her entire life, convinced himself she was responsible and capable, and now reality was crashing down around him. "What about your retirement?" I asked. "Gone, liquidated for the trust fund. The business failing, I might have to declare bankruptcy." He destroyed his financial future, trying to secure Brianna's, and she was throwing it away like confetti. Meanwhile, I'd been propping up the family for years, sacrificing my own future and receiving nothing but expectations for more sacrifice. "I'm sorry, George," he said finally. "I know I've asked too much of you. I know this isn't fair. But sorry wasn't enough. Sorry didn't erase 3 years of stress and sacrifice. Sorry didn't pay for my education or fix my car or give me back the opportunities I'd missed. I didn't make any dramatic declarations that day. I just listened, nodded, and told Dad I needed time to think. But driving home, my mind was already working, calculating, planning. The next morning, I called my academic advisor and explained my situation. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison had been my mentor since freshman year, and she understood the pressures of putting yourself through school. "George, you qualify for emergency financial aid. There's also a work-study program with the engineering department that could help cover your expenses." For the first time in years, I started thinking about my own future instead of my family's problems. I applied for the work-study position, filed for emergency aid, and began looking into scholarships I'd never had time to pursue because I was too busy working 2 jobs. I also did something I'd never done before. I blocked Dad and Brianna's numbers. Not permanently, but I needed space to think without the constant pressure and guilt trips. The relief was immediate and overwhelming. No more desperate calls about mortgage payments. No more watching Brianna's Instagram stories and feeling sick about her spending. No more lying awake at night wondering how I was going to pay for everything. Within 2 weeks, I'd been accepted into the work-study program and received a partial emergency grant. I quit the landscaping job and reduced my hours at the auto parts store. Suddenly, I had time to actually study, to join a study group, to maybe even have something resembling a social life. My grades improved immediately without the constant stress of supporting my family. I could focus on learning instead of just surviving. My professors noticed the change and started talking to me about research opportunities, internships, graduate school possibilities I'd never dared to consider. But Dad wasn't giving up easily. When he couldn't reach me directly, he started calling Tyler, my roommate, asking him to pass along messages about how desperate the situation was getting. Tyler, to his credit, told Dad to stop using him as a messenger service. "Dude, your family is seriously messed up," Tyler said after the 3rd call. "Your dad's acting like you're responsible for fixing everyone's problems." Uncle Patrick called, too. But his message was different. I looked into the trust fund situation. Your dad can't just give away family assets without discussing it with everyone involved. You might want to talk to a lawyer. I hadn't considered that angle, but Uncle Patrick was right. The lake house had been purchased with money Dad had saved during his marriage to Mom. Legally, it might be considered marital property, which could make me entitled to a portion of its value. The idea of fighting my own family in court made me sick, but I also remembered all the times I'd sacrificed for them, all the opportunities I'd missed, all the stress I'd endured. Maybe it was time to stop being the family martyr and start being my own advocate. I found a legal aid clinic through the university that offered free consultations for students. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Williams, listened to my story and shook her head. "You've been taken advantage of systematically," she said bluntly. "The mortgage situation especially concerns me. If your name is on documents as a reference without your full understanding of the implications, that could constitute fraud." She agreed to look into the legal aspects of my situation, starting with getting copies of all the mortgage and property documents. It would take time, but for the first time in years, I felt like I had someone on my side who understood how to fight back properly. The wheels were in motion. I just hoped I was strong enough to see it through. The text arrived on a cold Tuesday morning in December. "The mortgage is due. Need help now." No greeting, no acknowledgement of the 2 months since we'd last spoken. Just another demand disguised as an emergency. I stared at the message for exactly 30 seconds, then typed back, "Dad, since Brianna has her trust fund, family expenses should come from there now. I'm redirecting my money toward my own education and future. I suggest you contact the family financial advisor about trust fund management. I wish you both well. Send." My phone started ringing immediately. I let it go to voicemail. Then Brianna called, also voicemail. Then Dad again. The voicemails were predictable. Anger, guilt, accusations of abandonment. Brianna crying about how she never asked for this responsibility and couldn't understand why I was being so mean. Dad calling me selfish and ungrateful, saying Mom would be ashamed of me. But I was done carrying their burdens. Patricia Williams had confirmed what I suspected. I had legal grounds to demand compensation for the years I'd supported the family. The mortgage documents showed my name listed as a financial guarantor without my knowledge. A form of fraud that could invalidate the entire agreement. More importantly, I discovered something Dad hadn't told me. The lake house deed listed both his and Mom's names as joint owners. When she died, her half should have gone to her estate, which meant it was legally mine and Brianna's inheritance. Dad had been collecting mortgage payments on a property that wasn't entirely his to control. I didn't need to fight him in court, though. The math was simple enough. Within 3 months, Brianna had blown through most of her trust fund. The BMW payments alone were $800 a month. Add her rent, shopping, dining, and travel, and she was spending faster than she could count. Meanwhile, the lake house was scheduled for foreclosure in January. Dad's construction business had folded completely. His own house was next. I sent one final text to Dad. "If you want to discuss transferring my rightful ownership share of the lake house, my lawyer can help arrange that. Otherwise, I'm focusing on my future. Good luck." Then I blocked both their numbers permanently. Spring semester brought changes I hadn't expected. My work-study position led to a summer internship with a Burlington engineering firm. My grades were the highest they'd ever been. I'd even started dating someone, a classmate named Jennifer, who appreciated that I was serious about my future. The lake house sold at foreclosure auction in March for barely enough to cover the outstanding debt. Dad moved into a small apartment across town. Brianna had to get her first job ever, part-time retail at a clothing store, when her trust fund finally ran dry in April. I heard these updates through Uncle Patrick, who'd become my main connection to family news. He also told me that Brianna's new boyfriend had left her when the money disappeared, and most of her college friends had moved on to other wealthy classmates to leech from. "Your dad asks about you sometimes," Uncle Patrick said during one of our monthly coffee meetings. "He knows he messed up, but he's too proud to admit it." I nodded, but didn't feel the familiar guilt anymore. Some lessons could only be learned the hard way, and Dad had chosen his path just like I'd chosen mine. In May, I received a scholarship for my senior year. Full tuition plus a stipend for living expenses. For the first time since high school, I wouldn't have to work while studying. I could focus entirely on graduating with honors and landing a good job after college. The engineering firm where I had interned offered me a position starting after graduation. Good salary, excellent benefits, opportunity for advancement. Everything I'd worked toward while my family expected me to sacrifice my dreams for their comfort. I drove past the lake house once that summer. The new owners had already started repairs, fixing the dock and painting the exterior. It looked better than it had in years. The hardest part wasn't losing the house or cutting contact with my family. It was realizing that I'd never really mattered to them as anything more than a source of financial support. But that realization also set me free. Vincent faced the complete collapse of his financial security. His construction business bankruptcy became public record, destroying his reputation in the local industry. The stress triggered health problems that required expensive medical treatment he could no longer afford. He spent his remaining years working part-time retail jobs, never able to rebuild what he'd lost through poor planning and favoritism. Brianna's reckless spending became a cautionary tale among her former social circle. When her trust fund evaporated, she discovered that most of her friendships had been based on her ability to pay for expensive outings and gifts. She struggled with entry-level jobs, having never developed work skills or financial discipline. The BMW was repossessed within 6 months, leaving her with damaged credit and a pile of debt. Her party friends moved on to other wealthy targets, leaving her isolated and bitter. The designer clothes and luxury experiences became memories that highlighted how unprepared she was for real life. She eventually had to move back with Vincent into his cramped apartment, where they blamed each other for their circumstances while refusing to acknowledge their own roles in the disaster. Looking back, I realized that setting boundaries wasn't selfish. It was necessary for survival. Sometimes the people who claim to love you are the ones who will drain you dry if you let them. Thanks for watching Jake's Revenge. If this story hit home, smash the like button and subscribe for more tales of standing up and taking control.